So we got some news about Dragon Age the Veilguard that seems to indicate that the game is already failing and is not going to sell very well. So if you look at the Steam wishlist chart, the game currently sits at 31, which is really bad because this is a game that is coming out less than a month from now, and you have games like Borderlands 4 that don't even have a release date that are significantly higher on the list. And then there's a whole bunch of games I haven't even heard of that are above Dragon Age the Veilguard. What the fuck is Carlson, Operation Lovecraft Fallen Doll, Rooted, Kingmakers? I don't know what any of these games are. I've never heard of a single one of these games before. Obviously, I know Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, but that's a remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, of a pre-existing game. That ranks higher. Indiana Jones is also not incredibly high. It's a game that's also coming out very soon. It's a game that I personally have no care or interest for, but it'll be interesting to see how the game actually does. But I can imagine the sales probably won't even be that high since it's a Game Pass title, so it'll be kind of hard to measure that. So that might ultimately play a bigger part in why it's not wishlisted more, because people just have it as part of their subscription. But if you're curious what the top 3 are, Monster Hunter Wilds is number 1, Deadlock is number 2, and Hollow Knight Silksong is number 3. Now, the reason why this matters is because it just shows how little interest and hype there is surrounding this game. I mean, it's a franchise that's been dormant for a decade, so that makes sense because you have a whole generation of people that probably don't even know what the hell Dragon Age is at this point. They leave these franchises dormant, and then by the time they think about bringing it back, it's like, okay, automatically the interest is not quite what it would have been if they released a game 5 years ago. But they didn't, because instead they were busy working on Anthem, the failed live service game that is considered one of the biggest failures in video game history. There is just no hype and excitement surrounding this game. All the YouTube videos and coverage that you see is negative, not positive. Most of it has to do with political culture war stuff and not the actual gameplay itself, which is why my previous video that I made discussing this game, I kind of pushed back on that and was like, talking about gay characters in the game and it being quote-unquote woke. It's no more woke than Baldur's Gate 3 or Cyberpunk were, 2 very beloved games. Cyberpunk at first was not, obviously, but it eventually won most people over after CD Projekt Red kept updating it and fixing it. Cyberpunk was actually more woke, because you had a lot of characters, half the characters in the game that were romanceable, you had to be gay in order to romance them, right? In Dragon Age the Veilguard, there's no such restrictions. You can romance whoever you want, whatever gender, whatever it is, and it just gives you, you have more choice because it's an RPG. But when I watched videos about Cyberpunk and the hate that it was getting, I didn't hear anything about woke, because it wasn't really like the cool thing to say and make videos about at the time. People were just talking about how the game was a broken mess and it was not finished. And obviously the PS4 version was on a whole nother level when it comes to that. Yeah, because in the top scars, it's so woke, and the they-them pronouns. Well, Cyberpunk had the they-them pronouns. Cyberpunk went a step further where you can actually customize your genitalia for your character. You can have a character that sounds like a guy, looks like a guy, has a vagina. You can have a woman character that looks like a woman, talks like a woman, has a dick. So that's somehow less problematic to you people, to the right-wingers. It's less of a problem than Veilguard. Veilguard's just this complete woke abomination, but Cyberpunk was not. I mean, I'm sure some people are like, well, Cyberpunk was too, obviously. But my point is, you didn't even get a fraction, you didn't even get 10% of the criticism levied against Cyberpunk when it comes to these culture war issues, which I find very interesting, and it indicates to me that this game is just everyone's favorite punching bag at this point, and not actually based on any substantive arguments. Now, so I didn't care about any of that shit. I made that very clear. This was all just a huge distraction that had nothing to do with the actual merit of the game itself, just people trying to push their political propaganda. But what I think is irrelevant, because this is clearly a huge distraction that's taken away a lot of the momentum that this game could have otherwise had, in a similar vein to Assassin's Creed Shadows, although I understand that criticism a lot more. You need to have a black protagonist for a game that takes place in feudal Japan. Really, you just had to. So in certain cases, I'm like, okay, maybe these guys have a point. I understand it. But since Dragon Age has had elements of LGBT in it since the very inception of the series, Dragon Age Origins, I find this entire discussion very, very silly. But I turned on the game after defending it because of the news that came out about the actual game and how it was going to work and how the choices were going to import, or the lack thereof, actually, of there being no choices at all. 3 choices from the end of Inquisition are the only ones that carry over. Out of the dozens upon dozens of crucial choices that you made in the previous 3 games, all of it's just gone out the window. So in that, I'm like, yeah, I'm done with this game. I am not supporting it. I can't. So I think that was another really bad decision, because there were a lot of people like me that did the same thing, that were like, yeah, we can't support this game because you're just shitting on your fans. And the core hardcore fan base is like the few people who even had any excitement for this game to begin with, and because you decided to shit all over them, it's like, yeah, I mean, I have no sympathy at that point. And what's going to happen is what's going to happen. This game is most likely going to bomb based on early indications. There was an earlier report from a couple of weeks ago that said that pre-orders were way below expectations, and I think that tracks with the wish list and how very, very low it is. And, you know, that's despite the game launching on Steam. You don't need the EA app in order to play it. It's the very first game that EA has put on in years that didn't require the EA app on top of Steam in order to run. Just run straight off of Steam. 100% offline, no live service. And on top of that, it's $60, not $70, which is a great business practice. You know, so they've done all the right things monetization-wise, and the things that really piss off gamers with the live service shit being forced on you and having to download a different app in order to play the game. All that stuff, like, they did it right in terms of that, but it still wasn't enough to generate hype. This isn't a Grand Theft Auto, it's not an Elder Scrolls where they can wait 10, 15 years and people are going to still care about the new game. Dragon Age was always a more obscure game series, especially compared to their other one, Mass Effect, right? So you could argue that regardless of what they did with the game, it still would have just flown under the radar and not sell very well because people just don't care about Dragon Age anymore. People forgot about the series or whatever, which I think there is a lot of truth to that, but some of the decisions that they've made and some of the interviews and press conferences and just the marketing of the game, the initial trailer was just so bad. Even the developers of the game thought that that trailer was bad and it shouldn't have been put out like that. So I think that tells you a lot. And when it comes to video games, movies, TV shows, whatever you want to talk about, if it has a good trailer, it looks so great, oh my god, this is going to be awesome, and then it actually comes out and it's shit. That happens very often, but very rarely does the opposite happen, where the trailer is bad and the final product is good. That never really happens, you know, so it's usually, it's pretty suspect that the trailer turned out the way that the first trailer in the Veilguard was. That definitely had a lot of people fearful of what the final product was actually going to turn into. It's very fascinating to see everything surrounding the marketing and hype and or lack thereof, when it comes to the release of this game, and it'll be interesting to see how the game actually does in terms of sales. I'll be watching from the sidelines because I will not be supporting this game after I initially was all in on it. I'm like, I can't support you guys for what you've done to the community. I just can't. And as far as I'm concerned, the Dragon Age series is dead to me. I am probably never coming back after the lack of choice import, which is like the key aspect of the series. To just get rid of that and toss it away. Yeah, I can't get behind it. But let me know what you guys think about the Veilguard, and if you plan on buying it, and what do you think about everything that's been going on leading up to the release of this game.